we're all humans, and it's a human game. I know we think we just plug and play, but that's not how it works, and so there actually has to be some emotional investment in this, for sure. And, we'll see. I think our guys are in great place, but it's still different. They come in the locker room, they don't see Khris. Giannis has come in the locker room in his entire career, and he has seen Khris. So, it's a tough one because Khris is, in a lot of ways, is Milwaukee. Won a title and did so many good things. So we will miss him. We'll not only just miss his basketball, but we'll miss his brain, and we'll miss a lot of things that he brought to the team.
When the Milwaukee Bucks first pulled the trigger on the Kyle Kuzma trade, I didn't really know how to feel about it. Because not only is Kuz in the midst of maybe his worst season as a pro, but the Bucks had to trade franchise legend Khris Middleton just to get him. And despite the regression we've seen in K-Mid's game this season, coming off that double ankle surgery procedure he had done in the offseason, I was a big advocate against moving him at the deadline. I mean, for one, there's nobody on the roster that understands how to play off of Giannis quite like Khris does. We're starting to see Dame get more comfortable alongside GA, but even then, the difference in chemistry between K-Mid and Giannis versus Dame and Giannis is night and day, and spending 12 seasons together as teammates definitely has a lot to do with that. Another aspect of Middleton's game that was really nice to rely on is his great playmaking ability. Because while Khris may not have the gravity of a Dame or a Giannis when he has the ball in his hands, his natural feel for the game and elite basketball IQ allows him to make superb reads against opposing defenses. And having this type of savvy to come off the bench and run the second unit was certainly a luxury, especially given the Bucks' limited playmaking options off the bench. And all of this goes without mentioning the fact that Middleton is still an incredible shot creator in the mid-range area, as he's in the 95th percentile of all mid-range scorers at his position this season, shooting a scorching 59% clip on over 100 attempts from this area on the year. So with all of that being said, I was strongly against moving Middleton, and there just seemed to be easier ways to get out of the second apron and continue building this roster without having to sacrifice the franchise legend. But things didn't work out quite the way I expected them to. And this really set in when I noticed that the Bucks also included rookie guard AJ Johnson in the deal, because Johnson was one of the few young assets in Milwaukee's locker room that showed true flashes of being something more than a role player at some point in his career. His game may look extremely raw now, but considering he's got speed and athleticism that simply can't be taught, he damn sure has the physical tools to get there. So again, revisiting how I felt about the trade initially, I wasn't a fan, and the big question that I had was why Kuz? But now that I've had a few days to process this trade, I think I know the answer to that question.
I think he's been very impactful. He's a guy who, watching from a distance, I always felt like, he can hoop. He's a good player, and then you get him on your team and get a closer look, and you can hear how he interacts throughout a game, and you see how well he understands the game, how he knows how to position himself to help the team in whatever we're trying to do. In the last 2 games, he's been probably talking to me more than anybody on the court, about situations and the way they defended me and how he can help me, the spots where he's open. And he's effective in those spots, setting the screens on the low side and getting in the short roll position and making the next play, making shots. He understands the game, much better than I knew from watching him from afar, and he knows how to be effective and find his way, even on a new team.
Before addressing Kuz's fit in Milwaukee myself, I wanted to share Damian Lillard's thoughts, because his assessment is spot on. Through 3 games with the Bucks, Kuzma has found a multitude of ways to make an impact on the game, and as Lillard said, watching from afar, he never truly understood what Kuz brought to the table. And I shared this same sentiment until I watched the film. Because even in a career-worst season, there are still a lot of things you can pull away from Kyle Kuzma's game that can significantly help the Bucks from here on out. So let's get started by breaking down what he brings on the offensive side of the ball, beginning with his pace. Because if you didn't know, Kuzma's ability to run in transition is one of the main reasons the Bucks front office wanted to bring him in the first place. Because despite having quite literally the best and most dominant transition scorer in the NBA in Giannis Antetokounmpo, the Bucks rank bottom half in the league in transition scoring at 20th. So adding a player like Kuz, who currently sits amongst the top 25 transition scorers across the association, should be a massive help to Milwaukee's transition game. Because when Kuzma was in Washington, whenever the Wizards got a stop or forced a turnover, Kuz was always the first person to turn on the jets and leak out in transition for easy scoring opportunities. But he didn't just rely on others to help create these opportunities for him. He can do it himself, as Kuzma is an extremely underrated defensive rebounder who, like Giannis, can push the pace and act as a one-man fast break by handling the rock in transition if need be. And a couple of his go-to moves off the dribble are a spin move and high ball fake slow step, moves that allow him to better finish around the rim in transition. And if Kuz ever has a cross match against a smaller defender while running the break, he does a great job of using his size to his advantage, going full running back mode by lowering his shoulder to go right through the defender. And if he has these same transition mismatches away from the ball, Kuzma immediately posts up so he can still exploit the defense. Another positive that Kuz brings to the Bucks offense is his ability to finish around the rim, as he's currently converting on 69% of his attempts within the restricted area on the season, which is an above league average rate in the 60th percentile of all players at his position. And like we've mentioned before, this is a down year across the board for Kuzma, because just last season, he was finishing over 76% of his attempts within the restricted area, putting him in the 87th percentile of all players at his position. So say what you want about Kuzma's poor efficiency, but just know it ain't coming from the restricted area. Because when Kuz can get into the lane, he's excellent at absorbing contact and hanging in midair to create the right finishing angle around the rim. Not to mention, he's great at finishing with both hands. However, at times, Kuzma does get a decent amount of tunnel vision when attacking downhill, and as a result, he sometimes loses his positioning or gets blocked. And honestly speaking, he probably gets blocked more often than just point blank missing at the rim. So that should tell you how truly efficient this area of his game is. With that in mind though, if an opposing defender can push Kuz outside of the restricted area off the drive, his efficiency drops drastically, going from a 69% shooter in the restricted area to just over 38% on all other paint attempts, which is pretty horrendous to call a spade. And a big reason for this is the fact that Kuzma doesn't really have an efficient floater or hook shot to go to outside of the restricted area. And if he doesn't have a good enough angle to bank these shots in, then they really aren't gonna drop. His footwork in the post isn't bad, he just doesn't have a lot of go-to moves outside of his head fake and step through floater, or the occasional turnaround bank shot. And this can make him easier to defend in the mid-post. Another problem in terms of his mid-post efficiency, and I suppose his efficiency in general, is his beyond questionable shot IQ at times. Being a Washington Wizard for the past 4 seasons certainly hasn't done him any favors, but Kuz has gotta take better shots in Milwaukee, which is a perfect segue into his long mid-range shooting, because it's probably not a shot he'll want to take a whole lot as a Buck unless it's given to him. Because Kuzma hasn't been an above league average long mid-range shooter since his second season in the NBA, and his current 26% efficiency clip on those attempts is by far the lowest mark of his career. It's not like he's terrible at creating separations to get these shots off, it's just when you combine the quality of some of these shots with the fact that he's never really been efficient in this area, this is the result you get. But when he does find success on these shots, it's typically when he's got a smaller defender on him, because at least in those situations, Kuz has no problem getting to his spot and elevating over the defense. But long story short, this guy's no Khris Middleton when it comes to the mid-range, and he shouldn't try to be. Which brings us to the floor spacing and outside shooting. Kuz, generally speaking, is a below average 3-point shooter. And like most of his other shooting splits, this season has been particularly awful at just 29%, which doesn't even mention the fact that he can't even eclipse 30% on his wide open 3-point attempts. However, it is important to note that Kuz's role within Washington's offense had dramatically changed from last season to prioritize the growth of the Wizards' youth. And just last season, he shot 39% on open 3-point looks and about 36% off the catch, which seems a lot more like the shooter that Kuz actually is. And he should get more open looks with Milwaukee, given the Bucks' elite floor spacing, which ranks second in the NBA in terms of efficiency. And a crazy Kuz stat is that he's never even been on a team in the top half of 3-point efficiency throughout his entire career. The highest ranking Kuzma squad in terms of 3-point efficiency was the 2022-23 Wizards at 35.6%, and even they ranked just 18th. So not only will his open looks from 3 increase, but the quality of these looks will be phenomenal. And a sneaky silver lining of Kuzma's 3-point efficiency are his percentages from the corner, as he's been above league average from the corner for the last 3 seasons. The Bucks just have to prioritize getting him more looks in these spots, which I'm more than confident in because Doc Rivers has done the same thing with Andre Jackson Jr., encouraging him to shoot more corner threes because above the break attempts just aren't really his look. So I trust that Kuzma's percentages from long range will substantially increase as a Buck. But even if he can't find the shot, Kuz at least keeps defenses honest with his active cutting, as he's great at recognizing when a defender has their head turned to make a cut or a dive to the rim, whether he's creating an advantage or just following up a shot. But moving on to the playmaking, Kuzma does a decent job of reading defenses with a live dribble, especially when attacking downhill. And when you pair this with his already impressive rim finishing, Kuz should help the Bucks significantly improve their penetration and paint scoring, as Milwaukee is a bottom 5 paint scoring team in the entire NBA, despite having both Giannis and Dame. And Khris Middleton did them no favors when it came to putting pressure on the rim, only attempting 23 shots in the restricted area on the season at just a 57% clip, which for reference is in the 9th percentile of players at his position compared to Kuzma's 60th percentile ranking. So Kuz is a massive upgrade over Khris in terms of improving penetration and paint scoring. And we always hear Doc Rivers saying that the team's at its best offensively when guys are touching the paint and the ball is hopping. And this is all just a roundabout way of saying that Kuz's best playmaking quality as a downhill creator perfectly complements the structure of the Bucks offense. And as an added bonus, he's a good decision maker in transition, being an especially effective outlet passer off of a defensive rebound. And while he isn't the greatest ball handler in the world, Kuz can also make plays within the flow of the offense. The only problem with this is that can sometimes mean his reads are predetermined, and he'll end up throwing the ball right into the hands of the defense as a result of the predictability. He can also be extremely clumsy at times when he tries to put the ball on the floor, and this ultimately goes back to the tunnel vision that we talked about earlier, because the moment he puts his head down while penetrating, he typically finds himself getting poked or dribbling into no man's land where he has nowhere else to go. But overall, Kuz does bring some dynamic elements to the Bucks offense, and I'm excited to see how Doc Rivers utilizes him on that end of the ball. As for the other side of the ball, another big reason the front office targeted him specifically is because of his prototypical size and ideal frame that should hold up defensively and provide Doc Rivers with more lineup versatility, as at 6'9", 221 with a 7-foot wingspan, Kuz theoretically can defend multiple positions, and he has the size to match up really well with a lot of prominent wing threats in the East. Not to mention, When guys like Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis are getting fried by faster teams with more floor spacing, the Bucks can turn to a lineup with Kuz at the 4 and Giannis at the 5 to better match up. But all of this is in theory. The real question is, can Kuzma provide? Well, for starters, at the point of attack, he's definitely more tailored to defend bigger wings, given his size and length, as he's kind of slow-footed when defending the ball and often gets beat by quicker players. And because of this, he's not the most ideal candidate to switch onto the perimeter, and when he does, he tends to drop a little bit below the three-point line to compensate for his lack of foot speed, and this can sometimes result in open threes being given up. However, if Kuzma can stay with his man at the initial point of attack, he's great at using his body to push opposing players off their spots and force difficult shots. Off the ball, he can have the occasional lapse of watching the ball, but for the most part, he's in the right spots, especially when helping defend pick and rolls, as he's excellent at getting in position to tag rollers and tends to force most of his turnovers doing exactly that. However, he can tend to overhelp at times, and if the opposing team can identify this, they can take advantage by exposing Kuz's weak closeouts, as his lack of lateral quickness when trying to cover a lot of ground and his tendency to bite on pump fakes oftentimes gets him beat in these scenarios, which doesn't even mention the fact that the rotations can flat out be late at times. But let's hope that was more of a Washington issue. And now that I say that out loud, a lot of these defensive issues ultimately boil down to a lack of focus or attention, and those could easily be symptoms of playing on the worst team in the NBA. So the hope for Kuz is that he can correct these bad habits in a winning environment and live up to the expectations that the front office envisioned when making the trade. And by all means, I think he can do it. The talent is certainly there. He's just got to find his role. But let me know what you think of the Kuz trade down in the comments section below. And a quick shout out goes to all of my loyal subscribers who've been checking in on me during this video hiatus. Your unwavering support means the world to me, and I can't wait to talk more ball with you guys as the season progresses. But for now, that's all I've got, and I'll see you in the next one.